You are listening to Crossroads Church, bringing a real God to real people.
Hey, welcome to Crossroads. I'm Joel. I'm the teaching pastor here. And so grateful, so glad that our senior pastors, Marcus and Natalie, are back with us. It reminds me of a joke. Why is everybody cringing already? I haven't even told it yet. So this guy walks in. He's got this cowboy hat. Big old country guy walks into the church office, and there's a little secretary there sitting there, and the cowboy goes, "Hey, is the head hog at the trough?" And the secretary just goes, "Sir, are you referring to our pastor?" He said, "Yeah, is he here, the head hog?" She goes, "Sir, we do not refer to our pastor as the head hog. He's a man of God." He goes, "Well, I got a $500,000 check I want to write." And the lady goes, "Oh, here comes the big pig right now." So disrespectful. Anyway, I'm just glad the head hog's back. I feel. And he said, "Write the check." So, hey, well, we're going to continue this series we've been talking about called, it says Dreamers. And we've been talking about how every one of us, we've got some hopes and dreams for ourselves, for our kids. A lot of you have dreams for your kids that you say, "Man, I didn't get this growing up, but I'm going to make sure that I do whatever it takes to make sure that my kids don't have to go through what I went through. And I want to make sure that I give them a leg up, a one-up in this life." So you've been working hard trying to give your kids things you never had. You've been hoping to get things that you maybe never thought you could get growing up, but you're starting to see maybe now it's on the horizon. You're like, "Man, maybe we could actually attain this." You've got goals for your health, goals for your future, your finances. A lot of you say, "Man, we're going to do it. This is the year. Next year is the year. We're getting out of debt." Or maybe you've got goals for your marriage. You say, "Man, I know that a strong marriage is possible. I've seen it." But as you look at your life, the challenge with a dream is a lot of times between the time God gives you a dream for something good for your family or your finances or your career or your ministry goals, there's a long span of time between the dream being given and the reality of the dream. And what we talked about in the first week is the fact that whenever God gives you a dream, it's going to be something that's just a little bit beyond what's familiar to you. So sometimes he asks you to take a risk and step out from what you know or what your family knows. And sometimes people will tell you that risk is a bad idea. Maybe even your own family members. They'll say things like, "Well, who do you think you are? Do you think you're better than us?" Or "Don't you know where you're from? We're from Seguin. People from Seguin don't do this kind of stuff," right? Or there's all sorts of these reasons that people tell you, it's beyond what's familiar. It's uncomfortable. And that's the first thing you got to realize about a dream is when God gives you a dream that's from him, it's going to be something that's impossible. Because whenever he does the thing that's impossible, he wants to make sure you know it wasn't you that pulled it off, that it was him that did it. So we talked about that the first week. We're looking at the life of a guy named Joseph. And this is Joseph from Genesis, not Jesus's, the guy that raised Jesus, because he wasn't really Jesus' dad, but he was his dad. But anyway, that's a bunch of theology. But what I'm talking about is this guy Joseph, who he grew up in this really dysfunctional family. And we saw that his family did not like the dreams he had. He even shared his dreams. And you see over and over again, we're going to talk about this in a minute, he shared these dreams and the family didn't take it well. He said, "Hey, I had this dream where you're all going to be bowing down to me." And of course, those dreams don't generally go well when you tell your family that, telling your family that. But he tells them, and then he has another dream, and the family doesn't respond well to it. So Joseph's got this dysfunctional family. Then what we saw last week is there's always a season in your life when you're going towards this dream God's put in your heart where it seems like maybe God forgot you. And I don't think I've ever gotten as much response from a message as the one I got last week. The idea that, man, we all struggle with this feeling that God forgot us. And you're praying to heaven and it just seems like he's silent up there. And we all struggle with these seasons where it just seems like God is not listening. He's not answering your prayers. You look around and you say, "Man, I've still got the sickness. I still have the marriage issue. I still have this, whatever the challenges are with my kids. I've been praying. I've been trying to do my best, but it seems like God forgot me." And my point last week was this, that, man, every day you have to remind yourself that God didn't bring you this far to ditch you. He didn't bring you this far to ditch you. He's got a purpose for you, but when we saw the story of Joseph, that it says God was with Joseph, and how Joseph, he didn't know that God was with him while it was happening. The writer of the story, Moses, at the end, as he's writing the story, we have the luxury of life is lived forward, but only understood looking backwards. With Joseph, we had the luxury of seeing that it worked out good for Joseph. God was with Joseph. But man, when Joseph was in the middle of the struggle, it sure probably didn't feel like God was with Joseph. And for a lot of you, I know you're in a struggle right now that just keeps going, and you're just like, I just feel like God's forgotten me. Well, he hasn't forgotten you. So I encourage you to check out that message last week, because this week we're going to be talking about what to do when you've got a challenge around you that's just blocking you, and you just cannot get what you're shooting for. So when I was 18 years old, I went and applied for a job at the San Antonio airport with Southwest Airlines, and they hired me. And they probably shouldn't have hired me because I didn't know anything. I was an 18-year-old kid. But they hired me, and I started working at Southwest Airlines at the airport. And I loved the job. And about a year in, when I was the ripe old age of 19, a supervisor position came open. And I was like, you know what? I've got a dream for my life. I'm going to apply for that supervisor position. Man, imagine if I make supervisor at 19, how far I'll go. So I went in and I applied for the job. And the great thing was the guy I was applying for the job against, he was not very bright. So I was like, I'm gonna get this job. But I got denied the promotion. And I was so frustrated. So I was like, okay. And I knew why. I knew it was because I was 19. But an employer can't tell you that because that's age discrimination, right? So they're like, well, you just need a little bit more experience under your belt. I'm like, man, I know this job. So I waited about another 6 months, another position came open. I was like, all right, this is the one. I went and applied, and I got turned down again for that position of supervisor. And I remember I started getting really mad. I got mad at my bosses. I got mad at the company. And I remember this vowing in my head thinking, if my company doesn't know how valuable I am, I'm going to make sure that the customers know how valuable I am. So I just kind of turned all my energy toward like bending over backwards for customers, doing whatever I could to help them in their situation. And you know what started happening? I started getting all these commendation letters. People would write in letters about how great I was. Because, if you've ever worked with an airline agent, some of them are kind of mean, right? Ever seen that? I'm sorry, I can't get you out for the next 5 days. You're going to have to go home. No, we can't put you in a hotel. No. It's like, I tried to not be that guy because I know the reputation. So I started getting all these letters. In fact, I got this one letter. This was kind of funny because this guy, he landed on the last flight from, the weirdest stuff happened on flights from Las Vegas. But this guy landed in San Antonio. It was late at night. He landed in San Antonio, and he's like, hey, wait, is this Los Angeles? And I'm like, no, this is San Antonio. He's like, dude, y'all put me on the wrong plane. I'm like, well, it's kind of a combo mistake here. You wandered onto the wrong plane, bro. So, we made a mistake, but come on. You got to, they make announcements. This plane's going to San Antonio. Again, weird things happen with people coming from Vegas. So he's like, well, my heart medication. And he had heart medication, and his bag went to the right place. It went to L.A., but he was in San Antonio. So I was like, well, you know what? It's the last flight. I'll take you by the hospital on the way home. So I took him by the hospital. We got his medication filled, and then I took him to his hotel, and I apologized for what we did. And anyways, a couple weeks later, I get this call from the headquarters of Southwest Airlines, and Herb Kelleher's assistant. Herb Kelleher was the founder of Southwest, called and said, hey, we're going to award you this super great customer service award, the highest award we give to anybody at Southwest, called the winning service, because of how you saved this guy's life. And I'm like, huh? What? And I find out this guy, man, he made the letter that he wrote sound like I dragged his lifeless body off the plane and took him to To me, it was nothing, but he wrote this letter. And so I ended up getting to hang out with the CEO of Southwest Airlines. And then I was like, bam, the promotion is mine, right? I just hung out with the CEO of Southwest Airlines, had lunch. I got the Winning Spirit Award. So I went and applied for the supervisor position. Turned down. I was so irritated. So I was like, fine, I'm going to go to college. So I just started going to college. Hadn't planned to go to college, but I started going to college. And anyways, as I look back, this is the way it always is. Life is lived forward, but you only understand it looking backwards. As I look back, I'm like, man, I'm so glad I didn't get that supervisor position, because it would have changed the way I wouldn't have had time to go to college. It would have changed my whole life. But the path that I went on is the path I needed to go on. And a lot of the stuff I learned at Southwest was preparation and training for what God has me doing now. And we're going to talk about that today, because here's what I know about everybody in this room. This is what I'm certain of. You've got something in your life right now that it is just driving you insane. It may be your job, where you're just going, man, I've been trying to get out of this job, but it's like the doors are slamming in my face and I can't take it anymore. I cannot take this. Every time I try and move forward or move out of the job or get promoted, it's like a wall is there. And it's just like, I don't understand why. Why does God keep putting a wall in my path? Maybe for some of you, it's with your kids. You're just trying to figure out, when are we going to get over the hump here with the misbehavior and the way they're acting? And every time you think you're getting a little bit of ground, like under the bridge, you're getting things done, the kid, something happens. Situation happens, you get a call from the school and you got to go up there and talk to your kid again or talk to the principal of the school. Maybe in your marriage, you're like, man, we're going to get this marriage fixed. But every time you feel like you're advancing, maybe last time you find the text messages that he or she is still texting somebody else. And you're like, why are you, we talked about this. This is not appropriate for you to be texting somebody else. We've all got these things in our lives. You decide to get your health on track and then you have that major injury that keeps you from being able to go to the workout for weeks. There's always something that it seems like is standing in our way. And I'm convinced that when you get into a position where you're trying to pursue something God's put in your heart and you hit obstacle after obstacle after obstacle, what you need to do is stop running from the obstacle and figure out, what is it that God wants me to learn right now? Because you are in training. What am I in training for? Well, the premise of this whole series is this. God's dream for you is bigger and better than any dream you have for yourself. God's plan, the plan he has for you, is what you would want your plan to be if you knew all the details. The problem is we don't know all the details. So we're sitting here banging our heads against the wall trying to figure out why God? And God's saying, listen, you don't understand what's happening. You're growing here. This is the challenge with growth. You're too close to yourself. You can't see growth. Kind of like we can't see our own flaws and mistakes. We've all got these blind spots. I was driving in Houston a while back in my little red Toyota. It's a little red Toyota Corolla. And I was about to pull over and I hear this loud horn behind me. I look, like within feet of me is this giant H1 Hummer. And I'm thinking, how did I not see that? It's this giant Hummer right there because it was in my blind spot. And we've all got blind spots because we're too close to ourselves. We've got blind spots about the negative parts of ourselves, but we've also got blind spots about the things that God has been building into us because they've happened so naturally. The things you've learned through the struggles you've gone through, they've happened so naturally that you don't realize you've changed because it's hard to see change when you're close to it. But you've changed, and God has done some things. And the plan he has for you is to make you into the person that he wants you to be, which is somebody who carries his image, somebody who looks like him in terms of how they live their life. So as we look at this story of Joseph, we're going to look today at when we see his story, we're going to look at the two things that I think that everybody learns, and his story exemplifies this, two things that every one of us learns when we find ourselves in a situation where we're in training and it's a struggle that we're facing that we just can't seem to get past. Maybe it's your job, maybe it's your marriage, the situation you're in. You're just saying, we just can't get over the hump here. What do you do when you're in that situation, and what is it that God's teaching you? Because again, sometimes you're so close to it, you don't see what God's teaching you. So we pick up the story of Joseph. We see that Joseph, he had this dream, tells all of his brothers about it, and it says they hated him even more. So he already had a dysfunctional family. If you didn't listen, if you haven't heard this series, I'd encourage you to listen back to that first week. We talked about dysfunctional families. So that's pretty much all of us. Everybody's got dysfunctional families, and how sometimes when God calls you out, sometimes your family's not even going to be in favor of it. So Joseph has this dysfunctional family. They get mad at him, so much so that his brothers actually sell him into slavery. So if you're here this morning like, man, my family's dysfunctional, have they sold you into slavery? Hey, you've got it better than Joseph, right? Some of you feel like they've sold you into slavery. So Joseph ends up becoming a slave. He was brought down to Egypt, and Potiphar, an officer of Pharaoh, the captain of the guard, was an Egyptian, had bought him from the Ishmaelites who had brought him down there. But the Lord was with Joseph. This is what we talked about last week, how, the author knew the Lord was with Joseph, looking at it backwards, but a lot of times we don't have a narrator saying, it's going to be okay. God hasn't forgotten you, right? So we have to be our own narrator sometimes and say, you know what? I don't know why God's doing this, but I know he's doing something here because he's got a plan for me. So we see that Joseph, the Lord was with him even though he was a slave, and he became a successful man even though he was a slave. And he was in the house of his Egyptian master. His master saw that the Lord was with him and that the Lord caused all that he did to succeed in his hands. So Joseph says, you know what? I don't like where I'm at, but I'm going to work as hard as I can. Well, he's working hard, gets put in charge of his master's house. Well, the master's wife he catches her eye, She says, hey, come and sleep with me. And we talked about the fact that whenever you are seeing, it feels like God has abandoned you, there's always an opportunity for instant gratification that can alleviate your pain, that can take it away and maybe shortcut, get you shorter to where you want to go, or at least take away the pain of feeling that God has forgotten you. But you can't do it. You can't take the instant gratification. You have to play for the long game. And so Joseph understands this. He says, nope, I'm not going to compromise myself, even though it made things a little bit easier for a while until the husband found out. It would have made things easier. I'm not going to do it. So Joseph did the right thing. And he gets thrown in prison because his wife, the Potiphar's wife, lies about him. She says, hey, he tried to make a move on me. Potiphar gets mad, throws him in prison. And one of the things that's really important to understand is, guys, sometimes you'll do the right thing and things will get worse for you. There's your Hallmark card for this morning. Hey, do the right thing. Sometimes it'll go really bad. But that's the reality of it. Sometimes when you do the right thing, things will go from bad to worse to worser, which is the story of Joseph. Because here's what happens. Joseph, first of all, he's a slave, then he gets lied about, and then he gets thrown into prison. And this is where we pick up the story this morning. But the Lord was with Joseph. Really? Well, we'll see in a minute he was. But man, did Joseph know that? Probably not. But he's struggling. He's in prison. But God showed him steadfast love and gave him favor in the sight of the keeper of the prison. And the keeper of the prison put Joseph in charge of all the prisoners who were in the prison. Whatever was done there, he was the one who did it. Well, while he's doing this, a moment comes. He's been in prison. He's running the prison basically for the jailkeeper. Pharaoh, the head of Egypt, got angry with two of his officers, the chief cupbearer and the chief baker. The cupbearer was the guy who would bring the cup and taste it to make sure there's no poison in it before the Pharaoh took his meal. So it's a pretty trusted position. You got to trust the guy taking your poison for you, right? And he put them in custody in the house of the captain of the guard in the prison where Joseph was confined. So Joseph's in charge of these two guys now. And one night they both dreamed, the cupbearer and the baker of the king of Egypt, who were confined in the prison, each his own dream, and each dream with its own interpretation. When Joseph came to them in the morning, he saw that they were troubled. So he asked Pharaoh's officers who were with him in custody in his master's house, why are your faces downcast today? They said to him, we have had a dream, and there's no one to interpret them. And Joseph said to them, don't interpretations belong to God? Please tell them to me. Now, this is interesting because, when you're young, you're not super self-aware, right? You're not super aware of what's going on around you. Because we're naturally, when we're born, this is what we look like. It's me. You ever notice that? My daughter Elise, when she was born, she was so self-focused. It was just insane. She would cry. She wanted me to change her diaper. It's like, come on, do some of this for yourself, right? But here's the thing. We're all prone to be this way. We're born being self-centered. And if you look at the story of Joseph, he was pretty self-centered because he didn't even realize how upset his dream, when he told his dream to his brothers, he didn't realize how upset the dream made them. How do we know it didn't realize how upset it made them? Because he told them again the dream. He had two dreams, and both times it didn't go well for him, but he tells them, but he was so focused on me, look what's going to happen. You guys are going to bow before me. And it caused a lot of problems. And we're naturally born, this is our natural state, is being self-focused. But I believe that in the struggle, a lot of times when we're hitting that wall over and over again, what God develops in us is outward focus. We get focused. If it goes right, we start realizing, you know what? I'm not the most important thing here. But remember, this is the natural state. But here's what the supernatural state looks like. Outward focused. Here's the problem with me. There's only so far you can go when you're just focusing on yourself and your problems and your situation and how hard you have it and what a victim you are. You're stuck, man. And we've all met people who are stuck because all they can focus on is how hard it is for them. You ever had that where you're like, yeah, I kind of know what that's like. And you're like, no, they're like, no, you don't. I have 4 kids. You only have 2. That's nothing, right? My problems are unique. My challenges are exceptional. You don't understand how hard my life is. Because they're just focused on me. But here's the problem. You get stuck in the me cycle. But listen, you know what's limitless right here? When you start focusing outwardly. When you say, you know what, I'm going to stop focusing on me and my world and how hard I've had it and say, there's always somebody that has it worse than me, and I'm going to focus on others. Because here's the thing. Any dream that God gives you any dream he puts in your heart, it's always going to involve people. Always. Because people are really important to God. Do you know how important they are? They're so important that God so loved the world so much, he loved people so much that he gave his only son, that whoever believes in him would not perish. He actually sacrificed his only son because people were so important. And so some of you, I know you've been hurt by people and you're like, I don't like people. And honestly, I'm an introvert. Sometimes I struggle being around people. In fact, church would be a lot easier if there were no people in it. Your job would be a lot easier if there were no people, right? People just complicate things, right? But here's the thing, God loves people. And if you want to accomplish the dream that God's put in your heart, you're never going to be able to do it on your own. You're never going to be able to do it just focusing on you. Me. Nope. The only way you're going to accomplish your dream is when you stop focusing on you and you start focusing on others. Because relationships are where it's at. Every good thing that's happened in my life happened because of relationships with other people. And when you're focused on serving others, it's the most natural thing that God uses that to get you right where you need to get. I was thinking about that this week. I'm so grateful for Pastor Marcus and Natalie allowing me to be part of this church, but also go out and speak at other places. Because without them, I literally could not be doing what I'm doing today. And I don't know any other pastor that would allow this, for me to just, sometimes I'll take off, be gone for 3 weeks, 4 weeks in a row speaking at other churches, and then I come back and we've got this home church. But you know, this is not he didn't just meet me on the street and be like, hey, come do this. No, I've known him for like 20 years. It's a relationship we formed a long time ago. And he's been a blessing to me. I've tried to be my best to be a blessing to him. And in that mutual blessing of each other, man, everybody gets the benefit from it. And that's what the same is going to be in your life, man. I see a lot of people that they're like me, my problems, my struggles, and they come and they sit in on Sunday morning, and they just sit here, and then they leave as soon as the service is over. And listen, I say this as compassionately as I can, okay? I've been hanging out in the church for 40 years. I've seen a lot of stuff. You're never going to get where you want to go if all you do is show up on Sunday and do nothing else for the church. Listen, this sounds so brutal and blunt, but I'm telling you, you're never going to get where you want to go if all you do is show up on Sunday and take. The way you're really going to grow is when you get involved in using what you've got to serve here. And some of you say, well, I don't know what I could do. Listen, there's all sorts of stuff you can do to serve. There's all sorts of stuff you can do to serve. Some of you, man, you're brilliant at computers. We need your help back there on the computers. You know, these whole light things, they work off of computers. It's amazing, right? Some of you are musicians, and you've been using your talent playing it for drunk people at 10 at night. There are wide awake people every Sunday morning that are looking for you to play, and they'll actually engage. They're not sitting there drinking, wondering how they're going to take a girl home. These people are engaged. I stopped playing at bars a while back when I was in like 21. They paid me big money to pay a gig. I'm like, all these people are drunk and stupid. I don't want to play for them. I'm using my talent in the church. And listen, we need your talents. And you may have to, but the problem is we get so focused on our problems. We're like, man, the church isn't meeting my need. The church isn't meeting my need. Well, let me ask you something. Are you bringing what you've got to the church? Even if you say, but I don't have any capacity to serve. Oh, you can for sure stand out front and greet people. You can for sure stand out front and greet people that are coming in the door. There's always somebody that's got it worse off than you, I guarantee it. And if you'll use what you've got to serve them and stop focusing on your problems, get involved in serving the church, you'll find that you'll get the fulfillment you're looking for. You know what else you'll find? The same thing Joseph found. While he was in prison, he started serving. He could have sat there and said, why should I serve the prison master? That's his job. It's not my job, right? But he's serving, and he learned administration, and we're going to see he needed that gift soon. He also learned to be aware of others. He saw the needs of the baker and the cupbearer. He could have said, you got just as bad, I got worse problems than you. At least you were working for the Pharaoh. I got lied about and this and that. But he didn't do that. He said, hey, I see you've got a need. Joseph also learned he's really good at interpreting dreams, which we're going to see next week, paid off for him. But here's what happens. When you start getting outward focused on how you're going to serve others, the most natural thing that happens is you learn your talents and abilities. There are all sorts of talents, abilities, skills, gifts in you that you do not even know are in there because you haven't been pressed enough to have to use them. And there's all sorts of talent that can come out of you when you just challenge yourself. But you've got to be willing to step out and do it. You got to be willing to step out and use that talent. use your skill to serve others, and you'll find talents and abilities. You say, man, I don't know. Maybe you're feeling called to serve in the kids ministry. You don't know that you may be the greatest child communicator that has ever been on the face of the planet. But you're never going to know if you don't go start serving in kids ministry. You may be you may have this amazing creative technical ability to see how things are going to look aesthetically and beautifully in the music, but you're never going to know until you start using it. And a lot of times you're in a place, again, I'm convinced God uses everything you're in. A lot of times we get stuck in a place because what we've done is we're saying, well, I'm just waiting on the Lord to deliver me from this. And it's something I love my dad says. He says, listen, when you're waiting on the Lord, don't wait. Wait doesn't mean just sit there. Wait means wait like a waiter. What does a waiter do? If a waiter sits down, he's going to get fired. A waiter's constantly, a good waiter's going, hey, he needs a water refill over there. He needs to be, his food hasn't come yet. Figure out ways to serve. And as you do that, you're going to learn what you're gifted at. Joseph saw that he was talented at administration. He saw that he was talented in other areas. And listen, I can't tell you how many people I've seen that have reached their destiny because they started serving in the church. My buddy, I love this kid. I met him when he was 12 or 13 years old. He was playing AC/DC licks, and I signed him up for the worship team. He turned 18. He decided he wanted to move to Nashville, and I said, listen, bro, Nashville will chew you up and spit you out if you want to be a professional musician. He wanted to do a world tour with a famous band, right? That was his dream. I said, you're going to get chewed up and spit out and forgotten about if you don't do one thing. And he said, well, what do I do? And I said, you need to get tied in with a church. And he got tied in with the church, and while he was tied in, that was the first thing he did. When he was tied in with his church, he started learning that he could develop these musical loops that go with the music, that supplement the music. And somebody hired him for that. And the next thing you know, he's on a world tour. He's only been in Nashville a few years. He's on a world tour with a famous band, doing cruises and traveling all over the world. Then he was just told me the other day he was on a national television show coming out in a few weeks. And you know why it happened? It happened because he stayed engaged in the church and started serving right where he was. And he learned there was all sorts of talents in him he didn't even know he had. In fact, his whole life, people told him, you've got ADD. You can't pay attention. You can't focus. Baloney. This guy will spend 6 hours focused on creating this amazing sequence of music. It takes focus beyond anything I've got. And I'm like, you don't have ADD. You were just too smart for what they were teaching you. And so many times, guys, the stuff that you need to learn about yourself is only going to happen by doing it. And man, you're going to feel foolish doing it, right? Anytime you start something new, you're going to feel like a fool. I've been working on French, and we went to France a few months ago, and I felt like a 2-year-old. Me want water. Like that's when you start something new, it's the way it feels. But here's the thing, you get better and better and better and better at it. But you got to start somewhere, and it takes humility. And some of you guys, the reason you haven't stepped out is because you're afraid, what if I'm not good at it? Well, you won't be. But if you've got a natural talent for it, you'll get better and better and better and better. But you're never going to know what's in you if you don't step out and start doing it. And Joseph did that. So I want to encourage you guys, listen, you got a great place to start using your talents and abilities and learning what you don't even know is in you right here in the church. Some of you guys, you just need to start volunteering. You may need, here's the great thing about this. We have this class called CC Life that Pastor Natalie teaches, and it teaches you what gifts and skills are in you that you don't even really have. They use this thing called the DISC test, and you can learn like, oh, I'm really good at this. I didn't realize, because you're too close to you, remember? You're always too close to you to know what's in you. But I didn't realize I'm good at this, and we can position you in a place in the church where it's going to fit your giftings and talents. But you've got to learn about who you are in that way. So there's Myers-Briggs test is another great one. Another popular one is the Enneagram. When you learn about where your giftings are, you can start using those. That's what Paul says to the Ephesians. He says, listen, God made you. You're his handiwork. He created you to do good works, which he prepared before for you to do. He already knows what's in you. And he's saying, I need you to stop focusing on yourself and your problems and your situation and start figuring out how you can serve others. And when you do that, don't be surprised if God comes in and one touch of his favor launches you where somewhere you could have never imagined, just like my buddy who's on that world tour. He just started serving right where he was. He stayed faithful because he knew, I'm in training. And man, I don't like the situation I'm in necessarily. I'm starting from scratch, starting all over, but I'm in training. And that's where Peter says this. He says, listen, each of you, you need to use whatever gift you have received to serve others as a faithful steward of God's grace in its various forms. And you've got to be willing to start small. I used to get frustrated when I was speaking. I'd get a call, asked to come speak at thing, and I'd speak to like 4 people. And I'd be like, 4 people. I don't want to speak to 4 people. I want to speak to a crowd of people. And I started realizing, you know what? Get over yourself, Joel. First, I had to tell myself that. Like, who do you think you are? You have an opportunity to speak to 4 people. And every time I speak to 4 people, I learn a little bit more about how to do what I'm doing. And I'm hoping I'm getting better and better and better at communicating. But it starts, you can't despise those small beginnings. It started with me speaking to 4 people and in groups, and I get to speak to larger and larger groups. And now I don't care how big the group is. If you didn't show up this morning, I wouldn't care. I'd stand up here and talk to myself. Because whenever I do, I realize I'm getting better and better and better and better and better. And I'm in training, and I'm going to master this thing that God has put in me. He's given me this gift to speak and to communicate. And you know where I learned that? Working for Southwest Airlines. It'd be chaos. All the flights would be delayed, and a fellow employee would call me and be like, hey, this is nuts. This is like nuts. Can you communicate clearly to people where they need to go? And I'd get up on this microphone, and I'd be like, if you're on this flight, go over here. If you're on this flight, go over there. And I started to realize, if it's a mist in your head, it'll be a fog in the listeners. And I started realizing the importance of clear communication. So I'm obsessed with clear communication. That's what I try and do up here every Sunday morning. I'm obsessed with it. How do I make it as clear as possible for people? And that all started with something goofy, me making announcements for people to get on airplanes. I never thought I was going to be a pastor. My dad was a pastor. I had no desire to be a pastor. But here I am. And it started with making announcements at Southwest Airlines for people to get on flights. And the same is true for you. There's something in your life right now that you don't like it. It's like going to the gym. I don't know anybody that likes going to the gym. Maybe I know 2 crazy people that like going to the gym. But man, the results of going to the gym you start to like, right? And there's something in your life right now that, man, maybe you just need to stop fighting it and you need to lean into it. And you need to say, all right, God, man, I've tried to get out of here and I can't. So I'm going to learn what you've got for me to learn right here, right now. And I'm not going to be bitter. I'm not going to get angry. I'm just going to learn what I have to learn, and I'm going to lean into this. So I would encourage you to lean into whatever God is asking you to do right now in this season. Can you imagine what a difference in mindset it would make for you if every morning, instead of going, oh my gosh, I got to do this again. Oh my gosh, another fight with the kids, another fight with the husband. Oh no, I got to go back to that workplace. Instead, if you said, all right, God, I know it's not always going to be this way. You've got something for me. So I want to learn what I've got to learn right now, right here. I'm going to serve. I'm going to stop focusing on me and my whining problems because there's always somebody that's got it worse, and I'm going to start serving. Can you imagine what a shift in mindset could happen? Listen, and then don't be surprised if you lean into that. I talk to business leaders all the time, entrepreneurs, and they're always asking me, how do you get the big money clients? How do you get the rich people? And I always tell them this, listen, rich people, you have to be introduced to them. But you know how you get introduced? By playing your A game right where you are every day, doing your best work right now. Because when it comes time to stand before kings, like we're going to see with Joseph, you better have brought your A game. If you're doing the best you can right where you are, don't be surprised if God launches you overnight into the place you always dreamed of. But you better be bringing your A game every day in what you've got, no matter how hard it is, no matter how rough the situation is.
Thanks for listening. For more, visit www.crossroadsc.com.